Jake Morrison pressed his face against the viewing port and watched the stars spin slowly past. The Galactic Academy station was huge, bigger than any city he had ever seen back on Earth. Metal corridors stretched in every direction, filled with alien students from dozens of different worlds. He was 19 years old and very far from home. Montana felt like another universe now. No mountains, no forests, no fresh air. Just recycled atmosphere and the constant hum of machines keeping everyone alive in the void of space. "First time seeing the academy?" asked a voice behind him. Jake turned around. A girl about his age stood there wearing the same blue uniform all students wore. She had short black hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Yeah," Jake said. "I'm Jake Morrison." "Lin Zhao," she replied. "From California. You're one of the other humans, right? There are only 3 of us this cycle." Jake nodded. Earth had joined the Galactic Federation just 5 years ago. Most alien species still did not trust humans. Very much. They called Earth a death world, a place so dangerous that only the toughest species could survive there. Many aliens thought this made humans violent and unpredictable. "Have you met the 3rd human yet?" Lin asked. "Not yet. What's your field of study?" "Engineering." "You?" "Xenobiology and diplomatic relations," Jake said. "I want to help humans and aliens understand each other better." Lin smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Good luck with that. Most of these aliens think we're barely civilized barbarians." They walked together through the main corridor. Other students moved past them in small groups. Jake saw tall, thin creatures with 4 arms and silver skin. He saw short, round beings that rolled instead of walked. A group of crystalline students caught the light and threw rainbow patterns on the walls. "Those are Quellians," Lin said, pointing at the crystal beings. "They talk through musical tones instead of words. And those big gray ones are Brulcax. They're supposed to be great warriors, but they follow strict honor codes in everything they do." Jake watched the different species interact. Most stayed with their own kind. A few mixed groups talked quietly, but there was tension in the air. Everyone seemed nervous about something. They reached the main lecture hall. Professor Velthon, a tall alien with blue skin and 6 eyes, stood at the front. His voice carried clearly through the room's translation system. "Students, today we begin a special integration exercise," the professor announced. "The Academy has decided to test your ability to adapt and work with dangerous biological specimens." A murmur went through the crowd. Some students looked excited. Others seemed worried. "We will be introducing a member of the HFY species to your class," Professor Velthon continued. "The specimen has been safely conditioned for educational purposes." Jake felt his blood go cold. He had studied the HFY in his xenobiology courses. They were apex predators from a world even more dangerous than Earth. They could phase through solid matter and had natural camouflage abilities. Most terrifying of all, they were intelligent hunters who could adapt their tactics. "The HFY specimen is named Krath," the professor said. "Mental conditioning has removed his aggressive tendencies while preserving his natural abilities for study. This exercise will help you understand how to interact safely with dangerous species you may encounter in your future careers." Jake looked around the room. Most of the alien students seemed curious but not alarmed. They trusted their professors and the Academy's safety systems. But Jake had grown up hunting in the Montana wilderness. He knew predators, and he knew that no amount of conditioning could completely override millions of years of evolution. "Is this normal?" he whispered to Lin. She shook her head. "I've never heard of anything like this before. Using a live predator in class? This seems crazy." "The HFY specimen will be brought to the classroom tomorrow," Professor Velthon continued. "You will have the opportunity to observe his natural abilities and learn about his species' unique adaptations. This is a rare chance to study one of the galaxy's most efficient predators in a controlled environment." After the announcement, students gathered in small groups to discuss the upcoming exercise. Jake heard excitement in many voices. A Quellian student named Zara played happy musical notes. Several Brulcax warriors talked about how honored they felt to meet such a famous predator species. But Jake noticed something else. The few faculty members in the room looked uncomfortable. They spoke in low voices and kept glancing at each other with worried expressions. "I don't like this," Jake told Lynn as they walked back to their dormitories. "Why?" The professor said it was safe. "I've studied the HFY. They're not just predators, they're smart predators. Their whole biology is designed for hunting and killing. Even if they've conditioned this one, his instincts are still there." Lynn frowned. "You think the conditioning might not work?" "I think conditioning any predator is playing with fire. And I think we're the only ones in that room who understand how dangerous fire can be." That night, Jake lay in his narrow dormitory bed and stared at the ceiling. Through the small window, he could see Earth in the distance, a blue and green dot among the stars. He thought about home, about hunting trips with his father in the mountains. His father had taught him to read animal tracks, to understand predator behavior, to respect the danger that wild things represented. "Never trust a predator to act against its nature," his father had said. "Doesn't matter how well you think you know it. When hunger or fear kicks in, millions of years of evolution take over." Jake pulled up his study tablet and read everything he could find about the HFY. The more he learned, the more worried he became. They were perfect hunters, evolved on a world where only the most dangerous creatures survived. Their ability to phase through matter made them nearly impossible to contain or escape from. Most disturbing of all, they were pack hunters who learned from each experience. A HFY who had been captured and conditioned would have studied its captors carefully. It would know their weaknesses and their technology. Jake tried to tell himself that the Academy knew what it was doing. These were the smartest beings in the galaxy. They must have taken every precaution. But deep in his gut, the same instinct that had kept his ancestors alive on Earth was sending him a clear message. Tomorrow, something was going to go very wrong. The next morning, Jake woke up with a bad feeling in his stomach. He had barely slept, his mind running through everything that could go wrong with the exercise. Lynn met him at breakfast, looking just as worried. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked. "Not much," Jake replied. "You?" "I spent half the night researching HFY biology. The more I read, the more this seems like a terrible idea." They walked to the lecture hall together. Other students chatted excitedly about the day ahead. Zara, the Quellian student, played bright musical notes that showed her happiness. A group of Brulcax warriors discussed how they would demonstrate proper respect to such a feared predator. Professor Velthon stood at the front of the room next to a large containment unit. The unit was made of transparent aluminum and filled with a strange blue mist. Jake could see a dark shape moving inside, but the mist made it hard to see clearly. "Students, please take your seats," the professor announced. "Today you will meet Krath, our HFY specimen." The professor pressed a control on his tablet. The containment unit began to open slowly. The blue mist started to clear. Jake felt every muscle in his body tense. His hunting instincts screamed danger. Something was wrong with the way the creature moved inside the unit. It was too alert, too aware of its surroundings. The mist cleared completely. Krath stood 7 feet tall with gray skin that seemed to shift and change like smoke. His eyes were completely black and moved constantly, scanning every student in the room. When those eyes passed over Jake, he felt like a deer being watched by a mountain lion. "As you can see," Professor Velthon said, "the HFY possesses remarkable camouflage abilities. His skin can match his surroundings almost perfectly." Krath's skin began to change color, matching the blue wall behind him. Several students made sounds of amazement. But Jake noticed something else. The creature's breathing was wrong. It was too fast, too shallow, like an animal preparing to run or fight. "The conditioning process has made Krath completely safe for observation," the professor continued. "He retains all his natural abilities but has no aggressive impulses toward other species." Jake watched Krath's eyes. They never stopped moving, never stopped calculating. The creature was studying every person in the room, memorizing faces and positions. This was not the behavior of a conditioned animal. This was the behavior of a predator planning an attack. "Now I will demonstrate Krath's phasing ability." Professor Velthon said. He pressed another control. A section of the containment unit became solid, while another section remained transparent. Krath moved toward the solid section. His body began to shimmer, becoming translucent. Then he stepped right through the solid wall as if it was made of air. The class gasped in wonder. Even Jake had to admit it was impressive, but his worry only grew stronger. A creature that could walk through walls could not be contained by normal means. If something went wrong, there would be nowhere to hide. Fascinating, isn't it? The professor said. The HFY can alter their molecular structure at will, allowing them to pass through most forms of matter. Krath solidified again inside the containment unit, his black eyes fixed on Professor Velthon for a moment. Jake saw something in that look that made his skin crawl. It was not the passive gaze of a conditioned animal. It was the calculating stare of a hunter studying its prey. Are there any questions? The professor asked. A Brulkak student raised his hand. How long does the conditioning last? The conditioning is permanent, Professor Velthon replied. The mental blocks cannot be removed or overcome. Jake's gut told him this was wrong, very wrong. He raised his hand. Yes, Mr. Morrison. What happens if the conditioning fails? What safety measures are in place? The professor looked slightly annoyed. As I said, the conditioning cannot fail. But even if it could, the station's security systems are more than adequate to handle any situation. Jake wanted to argue, but he could see it would not help. The professor was completely confident in his safety measures. The other students trusted the professor completely. Only Jake and Lynn seemed to understand the danger they were all in. The exercise continued for another hour. Students asked questions about HFY biology and behavior. Krath performed various demonstrations of his abilities. Through it all, Jake watched the creature's eyes and body language. The signs were subtle, but they were there. Krath's muscles were getting tighter. His breathing was becoming faster. His eyes were spending more time on exits and less time on the professor. When the class ended, Jake grabbed Lynn's arm. We need to talk, he whispered. They waited until most of the other students had left, then approached Professor Velthon. Professor, Jake said, I think there might be a problem with the conditioning. What do you mean? The professor asked. Krath's behavior. He's showing signs of stress and aggression. His body language suggests he's preparing for something. Professor. Velthon frowned. Mr. Morrison, I appreciate your concern, but you are not qualified to evaluate HFY psychology. The conditioning is working perfectly. But what if it's not? Lynn asked. What if something goes wrong? Nothing will go wrong, the professor said firmly. The Academy has spent months preparing for this exercise. Every safety measure has been taken. Jake tried one more time. Sir, I've studied predator behavior extensively. I really think... Mr. Morrison, the professor interrupted, you are a first-year student from a death world. I understand that your species has certain paranoid tendencies, but you must learn to trust in advanced scientific methods. Jake felt his face turn red, but he bit back his angry response. There was no point in arguing further. The professor would not listen. As they walked away, Lynn shook her head. He's not going to do anything. I know, Jake said. We need to be ready. Ready for what? For when that thing breaks free and starts hunting. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Jake showed Lynn how to move quietly through corridors, how to mask her scent, and how to spot good hiding places. She thought he was being paranoid, but she went along with it. That evening, they were in Jake's dormitory room when the alarm started. The station's emergency system blared to life. Red lights flashed in the corridors. The intercom crackled with panicked voices. All students report to designated safe areas immediately. This is not a drill. Security breach in Section 7. All students evacuate Section 7 immediately. Jake and Lynn looked at each other. Section 7 was where the xenobiology labs were located, where Krath was being kept. It started, Jake said quietly. Through the small window, they could see security teams running through the corridors. But Jake knew it would not be enough. You could not fight something that could walk through walls with conventional weapons. Somewhere, in the station, Krath was free. The hunt had begun, and Jake was probably the only person on the station who truly understood what that meant. The emergency alarms had been blaring for 20 minutes when Jake heard the first scream. It came from somewhere in Section 7, high and terrified and cut off suddenly. Jake knew that sound. He had heard wounded animals make similar noises in the Montana wilderness. Something had just died. We need to move, Jake told Lynn. The safe areas won't be safe, not from something that can phase through walls. Lynn's face was pale, but she nodded. Where do we go? We find the other students and try to keep them alive. They left Jake's dormitory and moved carefully through the corridors. The station's automated systems kept announcing evacuation procedures, but Jake could see that the alien students were not following them properly. They were panicking in ways that would make them easy targets. A group of Quellian students had gathered in the main corridor, playing loud, fearful musical notes. The sound echoed through the entire section, advertising their location to anything that might be hunting them. They're making too much noise, Jake whispered to Lynn. Near the Quellians, several Brulcax warriors stood in formation, facing the corridor with their weapons ready. It looked impressive, but Jake knew it was useless. You could not fight something you could not hit, and Krath could simply phase through their defensive line. Jake approached the group carefully. Zara, the Quellian student from his class, was in the center playing the loudest fear song of all. Zara, Jake called softly. She turned toward him, her crystalline face reflecting the emergency lights. Her music shifted to a questioning tone. You need to be quiet, Jake said. The noise will attract the predator. The Brulcax leader, a massive warrior named Thorn, looked at Jake with suspicion. Human, we are prepared for battle. Your fear scent is shameful. This isn't a battle, Jake replied. It's a hunt, and right now we're all prey. Before Thorn could respond, the lights in the corridor flickered and went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in a red glow. In the new shadows, Jake saw something that made his blood freeze. A section of the wall near the Quellian group was shimmering slightly, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Krath was there, invisible and getting ready to attack. Everyone down, Jake shouted. Most of the students looked at him in confusion, but Jake was already moving, diving towards Zara just as Krath solidified behind her. The Vex High was even more terrifying in person. 7 feet of lean muscle and predatory grace, with claws that could cut through metal. His black eyes fixed on Jake as he reached for Zara. Jake hit Zara with his shoulder, knocking her aside just as Krath's claws swept through the space where she had been standing. The Quellian's musical scream turned into a harmony of pure terror. Krath turned toward Jake, his head tilting like a curious bird. Then his skin began to shimmer again and he phased back through the wall, disappearing from sight. What just happened? Thorn demanded. He was testing us, Jake said, helping Zara to her feet. Seeing how we react, learning our capabilities. But the conditioning, one of the Brulcax started to say. There is no conditioning, Jake cut him off. That thing is a free hunter, and we're in its territory now. Lynn was scanning the walls with her tablet, using its sensors to detect temperature variations. Jake, I'm picking up movement patterns. It's circling us. Jake nodded. Krath was doing what any smart predator would do. He was studying his prey before committing to an attack. Everyone needs to listen to me, Jake said loudly. I know how to deal with predators. Your lives depend on following my instructions exactly. You are just a human child, Thorn protested. We are trained warriors. Your training is for fighting other warriors, Jake replied. This is something else entirely. This is survival. As if to prove his point, another scream echoed from deeper in the station. Then another. Krath was not just hunting their group. He was systematically working his way through the station, taking victims wherever he found them. What do we do? Zara asked, her musical voice trembling with fear. Jake looked around at the group. 12 students from 6 different species, all staring at him with desperate hope. None of them had any idea how to survive what was coming. First, we stop making noise, Jake said. Zara, I know fear songs are natural for your species, but they're telling the predator exactly where we are. Zara's music stopped abruptly. The silence felt strange after so much sound. Second, we move as a group. Predators like to separate prey from the herd. We stay together no matter what. Where do we go? Lynn asked. Jake thought quickly. They needed somewhere defensible but not an obvious hiding place. Somewhere with multiple exits but also good sightlines. Somewhere that would not trap them if Krath could phase through walls. The observation deck in Section 5, he decided. It's mostly transparent aluminum, harder for him to approach without being seen, and if he phases through the floor he'll fall into space. How do we get there without being caught? Thorn asked. We move like prey that knows it's being hunted, Jake said. Stay low, stay quiet, and watch everything. He began leading them through the corridors, teaching survival lessons as they went. He showed them how to use reflective surfaces to watch their backs. He explained how to recognize the signs of a predator nearby. Small temperature changes, displaced air, tiny sounds that did not belong. The alien students learned quickly. Their lives depended on it. When they reached an intersection, Jake held up his hand to stop the group. He closed his eyes and listened carefully. There was something wrong with the air circulation in the corridor ahead. Something was blocking the normal flow. He's waiting for us around that corner, Jake whispered. How can you tell? Zara asked in the quietest musical tone she could manage. Air current is wrong. He's there, probably phased halfway through the wall so we can't see him. Jake picked up a piece of debris from the floor and threw it down the corridor. It passed through the space where he suspected Krath was hiding. Nothing happened. Maybe you're wrong, Thorn whispered. Jake threw another piece of debris, this time aiming it to bounce off the wall. When it hit the spot where he thought Krath was hiding, it stopped in midair for just a moment before clattering to the floor. He's there, Jake confirmed. Phased enough to be invisible but solid enough to interact with objects. How do we get past him? Lynn asked. Jake thought for a moment. Then he smiled grimly. We give him what he wants, but not what he expects. Jake began explaining his plan. It was risky and required perfect timing, but it was their only chance. The hunt was just beginning, and Jake was going to teach these alien students how humans had survived on the most dangerous world in the galaxy. Jake's plan worked, but barely. They had managed to get past Krath's ambush by creating a distraction in the opposite direction. Lynn had used her engineering skills to trigger a fire alarm 3 corridors away, drawing the predator's attention, long enough for the group to slip by. Now they were barricaded in the observation deck, 12 frightened students from across the galaxy looking to a 19-year-old human for answers. Through the transparent aluminum walls, Jake could see the station's security teams running through the corridors below. They were too far away to help, and their weapons were useless against something that could phase through solid matter. How long can we stay here? Thorn asked. The big Brulcax warrior was trying to maintain his dignity, but Jake could see the fear in his eyes. As long as we need to, Jake replied. This isn't about winning a fight. It's about outlasting a predator. What does that mean? Zara's musical voice was barely a whisper. Jake looked around the group. They were all exhausted from the escape, breathing hard and jumping at every sound. In the wild, most prey animals would already be dead from panic and poor decisions. On Earth, my ancestors survived by being persistence hunters, Jake explained. We couldn't outrun a mammoth or outmuscle a saber-toothed cat, but we could outlast them. We could keep going when they got tired. But Krath is the hunter here, Lynn pointed out. We're the prey. That's why we flipped the script, Jake said. Predators expect prey to run, hide, or fight back badly. They don't expect prey to be patient and methodical. Jake began organizing the group for a long siege. He assigned watch duties, making sure someone was always observing each approach to their position. He rationed the emergency water supplies they had found in the observation deck's safety lockers. Humans can function on less sleep than most species, Jake told them. Lynn and I will take longer watch shifts. The rest of you sleep in rotation. I cannot sleep while that monster hunts us, Thorn protested. You have to, Jake said firmly. Being tired makes you slow and stupid. Slow and stupid prey gets eaten. Over the next few hours, Jake taught the alien students survival skills their species had never needed to learn. He showed them how to breathe quietly to avoid detection. He explained how to conserve energy during times of stress. Most importantly, he taught them how to think like both predator and prey at the same time. Krath is smart, Jake said during one of his lessons. He's learning our patterns just like we're learning his. Every time he attacks, he's testing something new. What has he learned so far? Zara asked. That we're not easy prey. That we work together instead of scattering. That we have someone who understands his hunting methods. Jake paused. That makes us more dangerous, but it also makes us a bigger prize. Through the transparent walls, they watched Krath hunt other groups of students. The predator was methodical and patient. He would study a group for hours before attacking, learning their weaknesses and waiting for the perfect moment. Jake saw patterns that the alien students missed. Krath preferred to attack when his targets were tired or distracted. He used his phasing ability to appear behind victims, cutting off escape routes. Most terrifyingly, he was learning from each encounter, adapting his tactics to overcome new defensive measures. He's not just hunting, Jake realized. He's experimenting. What do you mean? Lynn asked. Look at how he's attacking different groups. Each time, he tries a different approach. He's learning how different species react to fear, how their instincts work, what their weaknesses are. Jake pointed to a group of Centaurian students 3 levels below them. Watch. He'll attack them from above this time. They keep looking down the corridors, but they never look up. Sure enough, Krath phased through the ceiling directly above the Centaurians. The attack was over in seconds. He's building a database, Jake continued, learning how to hunt every species on this station. When he comes for us, he'll know exactly what to expect. How do we fight something that smart? Thorne asked. We don't fight him, Jake said. We make him fight us on our terms, Jake began, implementing a new strategy. Instead of just hiding and waiting, he started actively gathering information about Krath's capabilities and limitations. Lynn, can you use the station's sensor network to track his movement patterns? I can try, Lynn said, working with her tablet. The sensors aren't designed to detect phasing entities, but I might be able to spot energy signatures or temperature variations. While Lynn worked on tracking, Jake studied Krath's behavior more carefully. The predator was incredibly efficient. But Jake noticed something important. After each kill, Krath would rest for exactly 17 minutes. During those rest periods, he stayed completely solid and found secure hiding places. He needs recovery time, Jake told the group. Phasing takes energy, he can't do it constantly. How does that help us? Zara asked. It means he has limitations, and limitations can be exploited. Jake also noticed that Krath avoided certain areas of the station. Places with high electromagnetic activity or unusual energy signatures. The predator was smart enough to recognize potential hazards. He's not invincible, Jake said. He's just very good at what he does. But even apex predators have weaknesses. As the hours passed, Jake saw the alien students changing. The panic was leaving their eyes, replaced by a grim determination. They were learning to think like survivors instead of victims. Thorne stopped, posturing about warrior honor, and started listening to Jake's tactical advice. Zara learned to control her fear songs and use her musical abilities to communicate silently with the group. Even the other alien students began contributing ideas and observations. You're turning them into hunters, Lynn observed during one of their quiet moments. I'm turning them into humans, Jake replied. At least the part of being human that keeps you alive when everything wants to kill you. By the end of the first day, their small group had become something new. They were no longer just prey animals hiding from a predator. They were a pack, working together with intelligence and purpose. And Jake was beginning to form a plan that would turn the hunt around completely. But first, they had to survive another night. Because Krath was getting closer, and Jake could sense that the predator was preparing for his most dangerous attack yet. On the second day, Jake realized that Krath was no longer hunting randomly. The predator was moving systematically toward their position, eliminating other groups of students along the way. Soon, they would be the last prey left on the station. He's saving us for last, Jake told the group. We've proven to be the most challenging hunt, so he wants to end with us. Is that good or bad? Zara asked, her musical voice tight with worry. It's an opportunity, Jake replied. He's confident now. Confident predators make mistakes. Jake had spent the last 18 hours studying everything Lynn could gather about Krath's movements. The predator followed patterns, just like any animal. He had preferred hunting grounds, rest periods, and most importantly, predictable behaviors when pursuing specific types of prey. I know when and where he'll come for us, Jake announced. The alien students gathered around him. Over the past day and night, they had transformed from a group of panicked academics into something resembling a hunting pack. They moved quietly, communicated efficiently, and most importantly, they trusted Jake's judgment completely. He'll attack during his next active cycle, Jake continued. In about 2 hours, he'll come from below, phasing up through the floor, because that's how he's been attacking elevated positions. How can you be so certain? Thorne asked. Because he's been testing our defenses for the last 6 hours. Every time we've adjusted our watch positions, he's probed from a different angle. He's eliminated every approach except coming from below. Jake looked around the observation deck. The transparent aluminum floor gave them a perfect view of the levels beneath them, but it also meant Krath could study them from below before attacking. So we give him what he expects, Jake said, but not what he wants. Jake began explaining his plan. It was complex and dangerous, requiring precise timing and perfect coordination. But it played to human strengths, pattern recognition, long-term planning, and the ability to think several steps ahead of an opponent. The key is understanding what Krath really is, Jake said. He's not some unstoppable monster. He's an evolved predator with specific hunting behaviors, and those behaviors can be predicted and exploited. Lynn had been working with the station's environmental systems, learning how to control power distribution and atmospheric conditions in different sections. I can create the energy patterns you need, she said, but the timing has to be perfect. It will be, Jake assured her. Krath is smart, but he's also predictable. He follows his instincts, and his instincts tell him to hunt the same way his species has hunted for millions of years. Jake positioned the alien students around the observation deck according to his plan. Each person had a specific role to play, and each role was designed to exploit what Jake had learned about Krath's hunting patterns. Remember, Jake told them, this isn't about being brave or heroic. This is about being smart and working together. Humans survived on Earth because we could cooperate in ways other species couldn't. 2 hours later, exactly when Jake had predicted, the first signs appeared. The temperature in the observation deck began to drop slightly. The air circulation patterns changed. Krath was approaching from below, just as Jake had expected. Positions, Jake whispered. The alien students moved to their assigned locations. Jake crouched near the center of the deck, apparently alone and vulnerable. To any observer, it would look like the group had scattered in panic, leaving their leader exposed. Jake felt the familiar tingle of adrenaline that he remembered from hunting trips in Montana, but this time, he was both the hunter and the bait. The floor beneath him began to shimmer slightly. Krath was there, directly below, preparing to phase through and attack. Jake forced himself to remain still, even though every instinct screamed at him to move. The shimmer grew stronger. Krath was beginning to solidify, rising through the floor like a ghost becoming real. Jake could see the outline of the predator's head and shoulders emerging from the deck. Now, Jake said quietly. Lynn triggered her prepared sequence. The electromagnetic fields throughout the observation deck suddenly spiked, creating an energy pattern that interfered with Krath's phasing ability. The predator found himself half-materialized in the floor, trapped between solid and phased states. At the same moment, the alien students implemented the rest of Jake's plan. Instead of attacking Krath directly, they created a carefully designed sensory overload. Zara played a specific musical frequency that disrupted Vex's high hearing. The Brulcax warriors used their training to create precisely coordinated light patterns that confused predator vision. Other students activated emergency systems that filled the air with conflicting scents and sounds. Krath thrashed wildly, trying to complete his phase and escape the trap. But Jake had studied the predator's biology carefully. HFY needed complete concentration to control their phasing ability. The sensory overload made it impossible for Krath to focus. Phase 2, Jake called out. Lynn activated the second part of her program. The observation deck's artificial gravity shifted, creating a disorienting environment that further disrupted Krath's equilibrium. The predator was now completely trapped, unable to phase but also unable to function normally. Jake approached carefully, staying just out of reach of Krath's claws. The predator's black eyes fixed on him with a mixture of rage and something that might have been respect. "You're a perfect hunter," Jake said quietly. "But you made one mistake. You assumed we were just prey." Instead of killing Krath, Jake implemented the final part of his plan. Using equipment Lynn had modified from the station's laboratory, they created a containment field that would hold the predator safely until help arrived. "We're not going to kill you," Jake told Krath. "On Earth, we learned that understanding predators is more valuable than destroying them." 20 minutes later, the station's rescue teams finally broke through to their section. They found 12 students and one human who had not only survived an encounter with one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators, but had captured it alive. Professor Velthon arrived with the rescue team, his 6 eyes wide with disbelief. "How did you manage this?" he asked. "We learned," Jake replied simply, "and we worked together." In the days that followed, Jake's actions became legendary throughout the academy. But more importantly, they led to fundamental changes in how the galactic community viewed humans and their Deathworld origins. What the aliens had seen as dangerous and primitive traits, they now understood as sophisticated survival adaptations. Humans didn't just survive in dangerous situations, they excelled in them while protecting others. Jake was offered positions in the Academy's crisis response team and the Federation's diplomatic corps. But he chose to continue his original studies with one addition. He began teaching a new course called Deathworld Survival Techniques to students from safe worlds who needed to learn what millions of years of dangerous evolution could teach. Andrio. Quiet nights when he looked out at Earth among the stars. Jake thought about his father's words about respecting dangerous things. The galaxy was full of predators and hazards that could kill the unwary. But it was also full of opportunities for those who understood that sometimes the best way to survive wasn't to avoid danger, but to learn how to thrive in its presence. The HFY incident had taught the galaxy an important lesson about humans. They weren't just another species that had escaped their death world. They were survivors who carried the wisdom of danger with them wherever they went. And in a galaxy full of unknown threats, that wisdom was more valuable than any technology or weapon. Jake Morrison had proven that when faced with an impossible situation, humans didn't just endure. They adapted, they learned, and they found ways to turn their greatest challenges into their greatest strengths.